Hey guys, welcome back. So today we'll be having a look at how to create custom free mode clothing for GT5 using Blender and latest Sollumz version. So this is one of those tutorials which I have already done in the past, but it's been out of date for quite a while and I've been getting repeated requests to redo the tutorial, so here it is. But before starting with the tutorial, if you like what I do over here, please try to support me on Ko-fi. The links will be down in the description as it really helps me in making these videos. So anyways, getting started with the tutorial. So let's say you have any piece of clothing which you want to put in game. First of all, make sure that it has all the transforms applied. In order to do that, press Ctrl A and select all transforms. Okay, so once you have applied all the transforms, what we first want to do is try to adjust all the shaders. So if you go over to the materials panel over here, I have created a very basic material. So as you can see over here, it just has a base color texture, which is an image, and a normal texture. It does not have any random nodes or whatever. So first of all, make sure that you have a very simple material which only consists of image nodes. Next, what we want to do is find some piece of in-game clothing which somewhat represents of our custom mesh or custom piece of clothing, so that we can easily transfer the weights from the game mesh to our custom mesh, which makes the weight painting process a little bit easier. In order to do that, what we can do is first of all CodeWalker, RPF Explorer, and side by side we can open toby.space. It's a website where you can view different components of free mode pads. And since we'll be making a female t-shirt, we'll just uncheck the male gender over here, and since it's going to be a t-shirt, just disable the all groups and just enable the jbib. So now what we want to do is find a piece of clothing which somewhat represents of a custom clothing. So let's find something. So I guess this piece of clothing should work fine. It's very similar to what we've got over here. So in order to extract this, just copy this DLC name and search in CodeWalker. So to find this, just open up any of the folder. We are looking for jbib 003. Find that, and here it is. So let's just right click and export as XML. Gonna be saving this in my clothing tutorial folder. So what we want to do is export some of the free mode components so that we can adjust our custom piece of clothing according to our free mode mesh. So in order to do that, first of all search mpf free mode 01.yft. And if you are making cloth for male ped, just rename this F over here to M. Search it. You've got the YFT. Just right click, go to open file location. Then first of all, let's just extract the YFT as our XML. Next, go to MPF free mode and let's just export some of these components. So we can export head. Got the head over here. Export as XML. You can also export lower. So let's just do that as well. So let's just open up our Blender, CodeWalker XML, select our head, jbib and lower. Make sure to enable the import external skeleton button and make sure that you have the YFT XML at the same place as of your YDDs and click import XML. Just hide my custom shirt over here. You'll see that we've got the legs, the jbib and the head. The first thing which I like to do is get our weights done for a custom mesh. So first of all, make sure that you don't have any vertex groups or the custom mesh weight painted. So the vertex group should be empty. And in order to weight paint our custom mesh, what we can do is transfer the weights from our in-game mesh to our custom mesh. In order to do that, first select your game mesh, then shift click your custom mesh. Then go to object mode and change it to weight paint. Then go to weights, transfer weights, open up this panel and change the source layer option to by name and make sure the destination is set to all layers. Next, you can just see how the weights have been transferred. So you can just go through the vertex groups list and see how the weights are done. It won't be perfect obviously. So if I just hide my in-game shirt over here and if you just scroll through the weights, you'll see that it has done a very rough job, but we can work over it. So you can manually weight paint all the weights, redo the weights, or redo the weights from scratch, whatever you like. Just make sure to do the weights properly. That's the very first and the most important step. So I'm not going to redo the weights over here. I'm just going to transfer out these weights and just smooth it out a little bit. So I'm just going to smooth it out, set the iterations to 2, and that should be a little better. Yep. Next, to test that you have weight painted your custom mesh properly, what we can do is just select our shirt and add a modifier, which is going to be our armature modifier. And let's just select one of these skeletons. Let me just first hide these skeletons. Object, sure to select the skeleton. Okay, and if you just try to select some of these bones, it looks fine. So as you can see, the custom shirt also deforms when we move our bones. It's not very perfect, but it should do the trick for this tutorial. Next, what we want to do is set up our material. So material is one of those things which really gives you a headache. So in order to have proper material setup, as I said, you need to have a very simplified material setup so that it can be easily converted to a Sollumz shader, or you can set up the shader from scratch. What I'm going to do is set up the shader from scratch as it really makes the things easier for me. So I'm just going to remove the default material, and for peds, I'm going to add a ped shader. So just select the ped shader and click on create shader material. What we can do is go to Sollumz panel, texture parameters. So now we need to set some of these textures such as diffuse, bump and spec sampler. But when we are working with ped components for GT5, there's a specific naming convention which we need to follow while setting the textures. So if I just open up my texture directory, okay, so as you can see, I have got these textures over here. I've got two diffuse textures, a normal map and a spec map. So I want to have two variations for my diffuse texture so that I can switch between them in game, and a normal map and a spec map. So in order to name the textures, it goes as follows. For your first diffuse texture, or let's say you have a single diffuse texture, you need to rename it to the component name, which in our case is going to be a JBib component. So the component name, which is going to be JBib underscore, since it's going to be a diffuse texture, we're going to name it to diff underscore 000, since it's going to be our very first component or a very first JBib component in our custom YMT. I'll explain the things about YMT later on. Next, underscore A, since it's going to be our very first texture, underscore uni, since it's going to be a universal texture. Similarly, if you have multiple textures, rename it similarly, jbib underscore diff underscore 000 underscore. Now, since it's a second texture variation, we need to change the letter from A to B underscore uni. And similarly, you can add up to 25 textures and change the letter naming from A, B to Z. Next, we need to rename our normal map. So it's going to be jbib underscore normal underscore 000. And for a spec map, jbib underscore spec underscore 000. Okay, so now we can set all these textures over here in our Sollumz shader. So first it's going to be our universal texture. So I'm going to first select our base texture, which is going to be our very first variation. Next, the bump sampler or the normal map. So it's going to be this. And next, our spec sampler. Now what we want to do is embed the spec and bump map. And we don't need to embed the diffuse texture as we want to switch the textures in game. Next up, we want to make LODs for our custom mesh. But first, we need to convert our custom mesh into a drawable model. So in order to do that, open up the Create Drawable Object panel, make sure your shirt is selected, and click on Convert to Drawable Model. You just go to the Object Properties. At the Sollumz panel, you'll see that your object is now converted to a drawable model. Now we can make LODs by two different ways. Either you can manually make the LODs by duplicating this mesh and decimating it, or the easiest way is to select the LOD tools, select a reference mesh, select medium and low, and click on generate LODs. You can obviously change the decimation step. I'm just going to keep it on the default 0.6 level and click on generate LOD. And if you just go to your object data properties, you'll see that new LODs have been created. So you can switch the LODs by clicking on these mesh. See that each LOD has different number of vertices. Obviously, you can increase the decimation step as you like, or you can manually create these LODs. In order to manually create these LODs, what you can do is just select a mesh, duplicate it, select the mesh, generate, decimate to, let's say, set it to 0.1. It will look something like this. Click on apply, go back to your original model, view data properties, and let's say you want to create a medium LOD. So you'll just select a LOD over here, and you'll see these garbage names over here. So what you want to do is, in order to identify your LOD properly, expand this, and this is your mesh name, so rename it to something which is more identifiable. Manual LOD. Go back to your original shirt, and under medium select manual LOD. Now you can just delete this object. Now we have our LODs done. Now what we want to do is, first of all, set the hierarchy properly. So if you remember, we have imported this default object or the default piece of clothing. So just expand this, and you want to move your drawable model under this drawable. So you want to move your drawable model to this drawable object. So just select a drawable model, shift click and drag it to your drawable. And we can just delete our in-game mesh. Now what we want to do is set up correct UV maps and color attributes. In order to do that, select your mesh and just go to UV maps. Make sure that you have two UV maps. The very first one, which is going to be your UV map 0, is going to be your regular UV map, which defines your texture coordinates, and UV map 1 in multiplayer corresponds to the blood effect and tattoos. Next, color attributes. So coming to color attributes, you need to have two color attributes. So the very first color attribute, which is color 1, corresponds to how the object glows or the object looks in game. So for a ped, we need to set our color one attribute to orange color. I'll provide the link of an image which you can refer, which has a lot of details about vertex colors for the color one attribute. But in our case, we just want to make it orange. So you just select this. I'm going to just paint my whole mesh of color one attribute to orange. If you want to see the attribute, go to viewport shading and go to attributes. Set this and let's just paint a mesh. Once we have painted our color one attribute, we need to also understand the role of color 2. The base color of color 2 attribute corresponds to the wind effect in the game. So if you want your clothes to move or correspond to the wind effect in game, you need to paint the color 2 to white. And if you don't want the clothes to move along with the wind, you need to make sure to paint the color 2 attribute to black. And the color 2 alpha channel corresponds to the sweat effect in the game. So if you want your clothing to show the sweat effect, you need to paint your color to alpha channel to white, else paint your color to alpha channel to black. So in order to paint the alpha channels for color 2, we can use the vertex painter provided by Sollumz, and we can just pump up the alpha value to 1 so that the alpha channel is black and does not correspond to any sweat. Now what we can do is just click on paint. See that both the colors have been painted properly. You can look up my older tutorial to go in depth on how to paint the alpha channel manually, but in this tutorial we're just going to use the vertex painter. Next we can just rename our component, so it's going to be a jbib underscore 000, since it's going to be our very first component underscore u. And now we are ready to export our XML. Select the object and export CodeWalker XML. And for free mode clothing, you can enable the exclude skeleton option, since we don't need that option currently, and click on export XML. So once our XML has been exported, what we want to do is create our new YMT. For our YMT, we can download the YMT editor. I'll also provide the link of this YMT editor down in the description. So you can just download this. And once we open our YMT editor, provided with the screen. So click on File, New, and we want to create a new YMT. And since it's going to be for free mode female, so just select this option and enter a name of a choice for your custom YMT. So we can rename it to something like test clothing. On submit, and now we want to add a component. So click on components. In my case, it's going to be a JWeb component. You can obviously add any of these components. In my case, it's JWeb, so just enable the JWeb option. And obviously you can enable multiple components. So you can enable the bird, hair, upper, or whatever. Expand our JWeb component, and you'll see that the very first component, it's going to have the index of 000. That is why we named our XML as well as our texture to 000. And if you click on the view texture option, we can add a texture value, or we can add a diffuse texture variation to it. So click on +1, and you'll see that the second texture will have the letter of texture B. That is why we named our second texture variation to jbibdiff 000_B. Next, we can just save our custom YMT. So file, save. So once we are done with our YMT, we can just import this XML into a CodeWalker. So open up your CodeWalker RPF Explorer, while edit mode, drag your YDD XML over here. See that we have our JWeb component. Now we can create our YTD for our diffuse textures. So just right click, new, YTD, and now we want to rename our YTD such that it includes our custom YMT name. So just copy your YMT name, paste it, caret sign or the upper arrow sign, and now just enter the name. So it's going to be jbib underscore diff underscore 000 underscore a underscore uni. It's okay. See that we have a YTD for our very first texture. So just open up the YTD, click on add, and add our very first texture DDS file. Save. Similarly, we can create second YTD for our second texture. This new YTD file, paste the YMT name, caret symbol, jbib underscore 000, jbib underscore diff underscore 000. Now now since this is our second variation for a texture, it's going to be b underscore uni. Press on OK and add our second texture. Save. Now we are done with our YTD. Now similarly, we need to rename our YDD so that it contains our YMT name. So just rename, paste your YMT name, caret symbol, and your YDD name. Click on OK. Now we can just select all these three files and put it in our stream folder. So here is an empty resource folder in our 5M server. So let's just create a new stream folder. Drag and drop all these three files, which is YDD, YTD over here, and also our YMT file. Next, what we want to do is create some meta files and our manifest file. So I'll provide the link of this post down in the description. Just go to this, scroll down, and for our meta files, just copy this part, go to your stream folder, create new file, and we need to name this similar to our YMT file. So it's going to be mpf freemode underscore 01 underscore test clothing dot meta instead of YMT. Press enter and let's just edit this. So just copy this content over here, paste it, and now we want to change our ped name. So if you are creating component for males, rename it to M, else leave it to mpf. Now our DLC name is going to be our YMT name after the underscore one. So in our case, it was test clothing. So just rename it to test clothing. Full DLC name, it's going to be the YMT file name, which is same for our meta file name. So just copy this and paste it in the full DLC name. Now for E character, if you are using female ped, copy this, paste it over here. And if you're using male character, copy this and paste it over here. Since we are using female, we'll just keep it at that. And since we don't have any creature metadata, we will just let it be. Just close this. Next, create our fx manifest file. Just create fx manifest.lua. This, scroll down. You can just copy this as well. Paste the fx manifest. Set the meta name to what you have over here and over here. Save this and we are good to go. So now at this point, our resource is completely done and we are ready to test the component in game. But before testing the component in game, there's some things which you need to remember. So the very first thing is that there is a strict limit of 127 components in each category. So if you are creating a JBIP component, you can't have more than 127 components or it's going to have issues such as missing components, or it might not be very well synced in case of IM. So another thing is that whenever you are creating custom IMT, try to optimize it and keep all the components in a single IMT, as after each game release or each game update, the custom limit of YMT decreases by 1. So try not to create a new YMT for each component which you're creating. Instead, create a single YMT and add up to 127 components of each category in a single YMT as well. Okay, so now let's just test how our components look in the game. Okay, so once we are loaded in our game, let's just test out how our component looks. So switch to MP free mode, female, modify skin texture, shirts, this one, shirts, and here's a component. We can also switch our texture. So as you can see, this is how our t-shirt looks. I think it looks and works pretty decently. These are both of our textures, and obviously you can play around with the shader and try out our alpha channel to see how the sweat and the wind looks. But as you can see, there's no wind effect on our t-shirt, and it looks pretty shiny, which is due to specular map, but that's not an issue. So I guess that's it for this video. If you liked the video, drop a like. If you had any issues while following this tutorial, I'll drop the link of Sollumz Discord down in the description, so you can join that and ask for help in the help channels. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.